Your second coffee. Okay.
Okay. Hi, everybody. What do we have today? Ellen, David, Laura. I don't know who the huntress is. Camille and Tarya. Let's see. Let me make sure everybody's muted. And then we'll get started here. All right. So, can everybody see me and hear me? There's another one. Hi, Laura. Hi, Ellen. David, Camille, the huntress. Is that Jacqueline? I don't know. Type in your name if you're the huntress, so we know who you are. Okay, so let's just go to the site quickly here. I have good news and bad news. The good news is that we're here and it looks like we are recording today. The bad news is that we were not recording last week. So I don't know what happened, but it didn't record, and so I wasn't able to upload it. So if you were looking for that, that is why it doesn't exist unless you were here. So all the more reason to be here at 1 o'clock. Lots of human errors with this whole learning curve that we're on, learning how to do an online class. So I thank everybody for their continued patience while I navigate this. And I am about to take an extra class on how to do this even better. So stay tuned while I figure out how to add things like comments and places where you can upload your artwork that has to do with the classes. But for now, we will get started by just looking at the website quickly. If you haven't been here before, there is a class for each one of these Zoom sessions that I hold. And if you don't get my emails, you can always just come to the first page and click right here where it says join URL to see the video, but you're all here. So I think I'm talking to, people who already understand that. Anyway, then we have the fall section, and you want to click on today's date, which is 9/27. Is it 9/27? Yeah. Richard Diebenkorn and Georgia O'Keeffe. Two very fascinating artists. I love learning about these two, and I could spend a whole lot of time just following along with how they live their lives. The elder of the two artists, and this is sort of I think it's the first time, or maybe the second time, that I've shown two artists who are not living. So Georgia O'Keeffe was actually the earlier of the two, born on November 15th, 1887 in Wisconsin, and Richard Diebenkorn wasn't born until 1922. So both of the artists are not living anymore, but I still found it relevant to show their work, and they're both very contemporary regardless. So instead of doing it, someone from way, way back in art history with someone who's currently living and working today, we have two artists who are sort of working even around the same time period and overlap for a time. But that's okay, because there's so many comparisons we can make between these two artists that I think are really interesting. Some of those comparisons are subject matter. And that is first and foremost, I would say, landscape, figure, and abstract. So the way I'm thinking about this is they're sort of on the line between figurative and abstract work, and that is what makes it so interesting to me. Sometimes you're very sure that it's a landscape or a figurative thing, and other times you're not sure because they have such an abstract quality to the work. So Richard Diebenkorn, he was born in Portland, Oregon in April They relocated to San Francisco, and he's really known as one of the Bay Area painters. That was a good time for him when he was hanging out with people like David Park, and, Rothko was around, and all those other Bay Area, well, Rothko wasn't Bay Area painter, but there was all those other, Wayne Thiebaud was one of them as well. Joan Brown was another one. And David Park, who we're going to talk about next week, is one of my favorite artists. So moving right along through the Bay Area painters here. And he worked really hard. He moved around a lot. He had a family. He taught in a lot of different schools. He went to Stanford. He went to New Mexico, which is another overlapping quality between the two of them. And he taught in New York. He taught in Illinois. He taught in California. He taught in New Mexico. So him and his family, his wife and children, moved around quite a bit. And I was watching an article recently about him, and it was by his daughter, who was talking about growing up with him as an artist and how he worked diligently every single day in his studio, and no one was allowed to knock on that door. You did not knock on the studio door. She also talked about how the world pretty much their family revolved around him having a studio, and several times they moved around, and the living room was the studio if there was no other place to be a studio. So he went around to several places all over the US and taught and learned and dragged his family around and did a good job teaching. And she wasn't saying this in any way that he was a bad father. In fact, she talks about him very fondly as how good of a father he was. And she also showed several of his cards that he would hand draw, all of these sort of humorous cards for the family members, and she showed some of those. So that's a really interesting sort of twist on hearing about these artists being talked about by their children is often very interesting. And he had a pretty good career. He sold work. He lived and taught and had a pretty great life. And he died at the age of 71 from emphysema. Then we have Georgia O'Keeffe, who was born in Wisconsin in November 19th, and she was the oldest of 6 siblings. There's not too much talk about so much of her early life. It's so much more stressed upon her days living in New Mexico, but we also know that she enjoyed some time in New York, which is where she met her husband, the renowned photographer, Alfred Stieglitz, and they had quite the love romance for several years, and they shared letters back and forth, and they eventually lived together, and he was much older than her, and so that was sort of a stigma that they carried around, and they had a very romantic relationship, and some of her work is sort of attuned to that, is what people say. She doesn't like to talk about that. She doesn't think that her work has anything to do with sexuality or feminism or anything like that. So she really attributes a lot of her work to seeing and what needed to be created at the time, and sort of a searching. And that's what she was really looking for in her work, constantly searching and looking and using things that were interesting to her to make her works of art. She spent a good amount of time in the desert painting, and I'm telling you, this documentary on BBC documentary is just fascinating about her, and it makes me just want to run to the desert and rent a little house and paint every day like she did. It seems like such a great, she had a pretty great life, she got to have the house in the desert that she wanted. She got to have the love of her life that she wanted. She got to paint what she wanted to paint. And she knows that about herself, that she was very lucky to have some of these things happen to her in her life. And she lived a really nice, long life till 98 years old. So if you want to learn more about these artists, these are some articles. I really like the Art Story website. You can log on and search any artist. They're not all there, especially the very contemporary ones, but there's a good amount of artists who have They post a timeline for you of when they worked, when they lived, what paintings they made when, their life story and analysis. So that's a really great website. If you haven't clicked on one of these yet, if they do have it for the artist, I always plug those in. And then just, he's really good at interviewing and talking about painting. This is a nice quick video, about 7 minutes or 8 minutes long. I really like the way he talks. I really like the way both of them talk about looking and searching and seeing and the way that they make a painting. But we're going to look at these images in a minute, so we'll just scroll through there. And then we have Georgia O'Keeffe, same thing. We have an overview and analysis to click on, and another article about her time in Hawaii, which was a pretty exciting time for her. And then a few videos. I think it's this one right here. Yes, it's called By Myself, and that's about an hour and 20-minute video. Absolutely fascinating video about her. So if you have time to watch that, please do. And then some views of her beautiful paintings. And then let's go over here to our PowerPoint. Let me move this over. Okay, we already looked at that, so we're gonna skip that, and we're gonna go straight to the artwork. Let me just check myself on time. Okay, so here we have a couple of images here, and the like I said, you know, the imagery that they chose is similar, but also very different in a lot of ways. But I think what is most fascinating about their work is the light that they both carry and the amount of space that they have in each painting. And this goes for the abstract and for the figurative. I think they painted the same way, whether they were using a figure or a landscape or an abstract painting or a landscape painting that becomes an abstract painting. And sort of they flip-flop between the two things. They are a lot of times abstract and figurative. And one thing to notice about all West-based artists, the Bay Area painters included, and Southwestern painters, is the difference between the light in the West and the East. You can literally put a New York artist next to a California artist and you can see the difference in the light, and I find that absolutely fascinating. Here we can see how they've, you know, they have all of their elements that are in this. These are both landscapes. They both contain animal or human elements. They both contain sort of this bright Western sky, so to speak. And then you have the way the light that hits everything that it does hit in such a bright, saturated way. Or I don't know if saturated is the right word. It's more like a diffused light, but there's sort of a strong light, a strong light coming at us. So you can see, you know, just the way the sky comes down and hits the mountains down here, and the way it hits the table and this back wall of the figure, and even the way it sort of carves out her face from the space, the way it hits her hands and legs. You'll see this over and over again, that what makes their paintings has so much to do with the light and then also the way they break up the space. Another thing I think they do quite similarly is the zooming in or zooming out of things, which creates and makes it more or less abstract based on the painting that we're looking at. This is a really good example of comparisons of breaking up space and using color. Let me move us over here. I guess we're not gonna get to see them all that way. So, you know, this painting on the right by Diebenkorn is based on a landscape, but it has become abstract. It has become an abstract thing. This painting here by Georgia O'Keeffe is of a flower, but she has zoomed in so much that it has become something else. And a lot of people see a lot of other things within these paintings, but they both have similarities, and those similarities are the light. They both still act as if they're a real object in space by the way that the light is hitting them and the way they choose to put color down. You know, this could be chosen to be seen as more of a helicopter view with the crops and the way that the landscape looks when you're up high and you can sort of see the breaking up of the different parts of landscape when you're looking down from a helicopter or airplane. And then we know that this is based on a flower, but we don't know just how close she was to that flower, what she was doing to make it look like that, or what part of the flower she was looking at. She didn't zoom it out so much that you know that it's 100% a flower. It could be a lot of things, and a lot of people think there's a lot of other things that she was doing, that they're not flowers, that they're other subject matter, and or they're implying other subject matter. And I think that's what makes these painters both really interesting, is their ability to sort of teeter-totter on the line of figurative and abstraction. We're not always sure. In this case, we could say it's a flower and we could say it's a landscape, but they both look very abstract. And how far do you push that? And when do you call a painting abstract, and when do you call it figurative? And another thing I'd like you to think about when you're making your own work is, are you thinking about how large or small you're putting something on the page? When you're drawing something in the landscape, are you looking at a fence? Are you looking at a flower? Are you looking at a plant? And how far are you choosing to push that abstract or figuratively? And how close or far away are you from the object? Let's move on to the next image. Here we have a much clearer, I can't get us out of our way. What if I do this? Okay. I'm just going to hide my face for a minute. All right, there we go. We have two landscapes, very obviously landscapes. This is Georgia O'Keeffe's mountain in front of her yard, and she's spent, I don't know how many paintings of this mountain there are, and I think there is one at the San Diego Art Museum. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they do have some really nice Georgia O'Keeffe's there. I remember being very excited about those. There's the house one, and it's sort of like a night house. Anyway, back to this more obvious landscape here with Diebenkorn and O'Keeffe. We can see very clearly that these artists are painting landscapes in this moment, and they haven't pushed it so far into abstraction. We still know we're looking at mountains and trees and pathways, grass and sky. So this is sort of on the line. Again, we can think about the way the light and space is hitting them and how much they've chosen to zoom out to make it more of a landscape rather than an abstraction. And then there's more examples where they've pushed it the other way. But the one right before that, this one, is definitely gone more towards abstraction, and this has gone more towards landscape. Or we could even say representational and non-representational. So they're sort of teetering on that line. How about that? And again, we can literally break up these elements and look at these painters, these West Side painters, as the way they break things up with light and space. Again, there's so much space in the way they both see, and I also think they both have this sort of and even Georgia O'Keeffe says it. She says, I see shapes. That's the way that I see. And I would urge everyone to sort of consider that Diebenkorn does the same thing. He sees things as bigger shapes and he breaks them down into these puzzle pieces that then perfectly fit together by the means of the color that he's chosen to put down. Here we have another representation. It's very obvious that this is a figure and a chair and another chair, and we're looking at a landscape here with water, maybe a beach or sand, I'm not quite sure. But again, we can break this up, and this one here is more abstract, I'd say. And she was always sort of had these organic, nurturing, also feels like puzzle pieces that fit together with colors that are very carefully chosen and also strongly affected by the light that they are witnessing out there in the desert and in the Bay Area, or wherever they were. But most of the time, we get very obvious that the color is what it is, and it feels really Southwestern, sort of. I don't know if that's the right, West Side, we'll say. I feel like these two teeter very closely on the line between abstraction and figurative. we know, or we can surmise, that this is a room and a chair and maybe some buildings out there, and this is a mountain with a reflection on the water. But we could also choose to look at it completely abstract, and these shapes are made and put compositionally where they are put for the sake of creating a composition in an abstract manner. So, you know, the chair is the most telling part. If we took out the chair, we could even not know that this is necessarily looking out and there be a landscape out there. So I really think, you know, and maybe other people see it completely abstractly. I don't really know, but I think that's what's fascinating about both of these artists. You can look at their work for a long time and sort of play with it, and there's an endless amount of searching that can happen, and you can find how abstract they are and simultaneously how figurative or representational they are as well. This chair piece right here is one of my favorite paintings, and it is about the light, don't you think? I think it's a lot about the light. It's about these windows and how they're affecting the ground with the light that they're placing on the ground. And again, I think this is more of an abstract painting than a figurative painting. And I could say that as well for this flower. Like, I know it's a flower. I know we're looking at a flower, but I think she's broken it down. I think they both break it down into abstract shapes that are based on light and space. And that is, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it because I really do believe that these artists are doing something very similar, but in a completely different way, or not even in a completely different way, just they're both using oil paint. They're both painting things from nature, but they're turning them onto the fine line of representational and non-representational by use of how much we zoom in, how much we zoom out, how much we clarify something, or how we fit the light and the space into the canvas in order to create something along the lines of abstract and also representational. Here's another scene, a figurative scene we have here, a representational or abstract, however you choose to see it. I think these both could be both of those things again. And, you know, I even talk to a lot of painters where you very much can see that this is a figure sitting in a room, you know, with a teapot or something, and you know that they look at you straight in the eye and they tell you, you know, this is an abstract painting, or they'll even argue that all figurative work is essentially abstract because it really is about breaking down the shapes, non-objective forms into objective forms. I also wonder, do you, let me see if I can get my face back up there. Okay, do we, oh, I forgot my question. Darn. Oh, I guess I could ask you yourself, you know, when you're making a painting, are you thinking house, 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 house when you're drawing a house? Or are you thinking, oh, this shape next to this shape butts up to this shadow shape and that becomes that? I hope you're not thinking house, mountain, road, telephone pole, mountain, cloud. I hope you're thinking more along the lines of the way that the shapes meet up and what those shapes do to each other as they overlap and fit into the space. Because I do agree with people who say that their figure paintings are in fact, very abstract. I think that's a legitimate point. But I also think that these two artists really push the limit there. They really make us question all the time what we're looking at over and over and over by how far they're pushing this. Now, he hasn't pushed this so far that we can't tell that it's possibly an abstract painting and not a landscape painting. Now here, I really feel mountain, but that doesn't mean that the person next to me feels mountain at all. So really it has to do with, oh, that's what I was gonna say. Never mind, it's gone. I don't know. I give up on that. Okay, and again, here we are, I'm sort of mimicking some color schemes here in these two pieces. of George O'Keeffe and Richard Diebenkorn. And here again, I feel like they've zoomed in or zoomed out so much that these have, or even just the nature of flattening each shape that they saw into its own form and choosing the color, or maybe changing the color to fit the painting's needs rather than what they're actually looking at. And that is what makes it more abstract. But I think, you know, you could look at these two artists and see all of these similarities and equally the differences in the way that they're putting together a painting. And I guess it really does come down to the way that you put together a painting, the way that these artists put together a painting. What are you starting with? Are you starting with something you know, or are you starting with something you don't know? Are you starting with color being the most important thing, or are you starting with composition being the most important thing? Are you thinking about light and space and shape? And I think these artists probably are painting and thinking about similar things while they paint, and that's what you can see in these paintings. I think that might be the last one. Yep, that's it. Okay, so I'm gonna unmute everybody and we can talk about this.
Soup is on the floor.
Okay, it was Jacqueline. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi.
Were you, whatever it was? The
Huntress, yeah.
yeah, okay, cool. So let me just back this up a little bit. Everybody's unmuted now. Oops, except for Joanne. Sorry, Joanne. You're unmuted. Ellen, you're unmuted. Laura, you're unmuted. David, you're unmuted. Oh, wait, am I unmute? Just kidding. Unmute, 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 unmute. Okay. Hi, Joanne. Sorry about that, everybody. Hi, Benedict. There we go. Okay, let me back this up.
Hey.
So, what do you all think about this? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Do you think it was an interesting comparison? Or do you think that...
wait, 10 minutes.
Or do you think that there's a better comparison that you would have compared these two artists here? So let me hear from you. Anybody?
I'll talk. I think it was a great comparison.
Who is this?
This is Ellen.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi. Yeah, no, I think that those two of my favorite artists, and I wouldn't have put them together. So I really love the way that you did that, and I see it completely.
Good. Thank you.
Agree. I'm with you. As a painter, I agree with that. No matter what I paint, it's always about line, shape, form, color, how they react, the relationships.
Yeah.
Not necessarily about the house or the person or the dog or whatever it is.
Yes, yes.
And therein lies the liberty that the artists take to change the value or the color or whatever it is that you're painting.
Exactly, exactly. So I think at some point, maybe these artists are looking at something representational, and at some point they stop looking at that thing and they do what the canvas needs, what the painting needs. And it's really hard to pull yourself away from something representational and then start maybe even having to turn it into something else in order to keep it interesting or to keep the colors interesting. You have to change the colors sometimes. Or, you know, because the painting and the way the colors interact next to each other is so vital, and it affects each other so much. You know, if this
is different in a flat surface than what you're looking at in 3D.
Yeah. And I think this comparison right here, where they're both using these sort of tans and grays with these bright yellows and blues, if those yellows weren't sitting right next to those beiges and tans, it wouldn't look as yellow. So that's when people start considering and moving colors around or changing the color of the sky or the ground in other ways to make it more interesting for the sake of the painting. Does anyone else want to say anything? Anybody? No? Okay. I hope you like George O'Keeffe as much as I do, and you're going to run away to the desert and be a painter by yourself. She did love being alone. She talks about that a lot. She's like, you know, I really love being alone. It makes me very happy. And yeah, it is quite people-y out there sometimes, you know.
She was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
There was there was an exhibit up in San Francisco that put Diebenkorn and Matisse together.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Which you could look up. It started in Baltimore and then it went to SF MoMA. But there's a great catalog, and they, again, another pair that I wouldn't have thought of, but the way they paired them, it was pretty amazing to see how Diebenkorn really did use Matisse as an inspiration.
Yes, yes. So that is, I mean, we could compare any two artists, really. We could find similarities in any two painters, or it doesn't even have to be painters, but there's similarities within anything. But I think it's fun to sort of try and pick out underlying themes sometimes that are not so obvious. So I'm getting a little more theoretical with you all. I hope you can you're okay with that.
To look deeper.
Yeah.
Katie?
Yes.
It's Joanne. That movie, the second one on George O'Keeffe, the longer one.
Yeah.
That's really good. And
it's so
really startled me on that one is the resemblance between some of her abstracts, like the one you have on the screen right now, and some of the photographs that Stieglitz did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was remarkable. Obviously she was very influenced by some of those photographs of the figure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we can't not be, you can't not be influenced by who's around you and what's around you. So that's also a good word of advice. Don't hang around people who you don't like their paintings. Because it's gonna rub off, I promise. And do hang around people who you consider your mentors as much as you can, because like I always say, art is caught, not taught, right? So it's gonna get in there, and we all have to see art that we don't like in order to find art that we do like. But it is a pretty good example of how much these things rubbed off on her subconsciously. And the landscape for sure did, and the plants and everything that she found was so organic, and that just shows so much in her work. All right, well, it's been half an hour already, and let everybody go and get back to their Thursday, and I will embed this hopefully when it's done recording and put it right into the bottom of the page. So if you want to send me an image of painting that you've made that's based in light and space more than anything else, please go ahead and do that. I realize that might not be as easy to find as you think. Or if you want to try making one that mimics, someone sent me with the Bonnard, they sent me painting and Thibaut that sort of resembled both artists in one. So the subject matter was Thibaut, I think it was Jeannie, and then it was painted with very much of a colorist attitude, but the subject matter was a donut in the window. Pretty clever. So hands up to Jeannie for doing that, and I'm going to post those soon. Still working on figuring out comment section and how to upload pictures, how to let you upload your own images of maybe your favorite O'Keeffe or Diebenkorn painting. That's also an option if you want to email me one of those. Or if you have ideas or opinions, feel free to send me a little blurb about that. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy the videos that I've posted for these two artists and articles, and I will see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.